So it's 7 p.m. Welcome to the Planning Board meeting. Let us all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the Westwood Planning Board meeting. All meetings are videotaped, recorded by Westcat Media Center. If anyone else wishes to record the meeting, please identify yourself so the audience is aware. Seeing none. As a friendly reminder, please turn off your cell phone ringers. The meeting will be civil and all people will be treated respectfully. This includes audible interruptions from the audience. In the event of a disruption, the chair will give a warning the first time, and if it occurs again, the individual will be requested to leave the meeting. The format of the meeting will be when an item is called, the applicant will come forward to the podium to present their application to the board. The board will proceed to staff comments. The board members will ask questions to the applicant. For public hearing items, the public will be given an opportunity to comment. Items that are not public hearing, the opportunity for public comment will be at the discretion of the board. When it's time for the public comment period, the chair will call those wishing to speak to the podium to use the microphone. You will be given a 2-minute time limit to speak, which can be extended at the order of the board. Please direct all comments and questions through the chair. All people will be given the opportunity to speak, but in the interest of time and fairness, repetitive or off-topic comments may be cut short. So, Abby, have there been any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes.
Okay, thank you. So the first item on the agenda is, number 1, is 215 High Street, open space residential development, special permit, public hearing. Could the applicant please come to the podium?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for the opportunity to present. So we're talking about 215 High Street, which is a proposed age-restricted development. Before we get into the presentation, what I'd like to do is just give you a little bit of background to put it all in context. I've been, Michael Yanoff. I've been a resident of Westwood for 21 years. My wife and I brought our 3 children up in the town. They went through the school system, graduated from Westwood High, and today we find ourselves in the position of being empty nesters for the first time. And we knew this was coming, and we always knew that when it happened, we'd want to downsize our home. The big question was, would we move to Boston? Would we stay here? And that wasn't a very long conversation because we both agreed we wanted to stay in the town. We love Westwood. We've planted very deep roots here. We've been very involved with the community. Our children love coming back and seeing their friends, so it was never a question in our mind, would we live here or not? Then we decided, okay, where will we go? And apartment living, top apartment style living isn't really what we like. We like individual homes, but we didn't like we don't love the hassle of taking care of a home after 21 years. And the more people I spoke to around town that were in the same situation as us felt the same. They were looking for something that was smaller yet less maintenance. And I happen to have a friend that at the time in Weston was building a community, just finishing it, 70-home, age-restricted community in Weston called Highland Meadows. And I asked if I could come and see what he was doing. And I drove up there one day, and the second I drove into the neighborhood, I knew this was where I wanted to live. I wanted to bring that concept to Westwood. I had never seen anything like it. It was just everything about it was warm and welcoming. The streetscape was inviting. The homes were right sized. The layouts were perfect for empty nesters. So we got to talking, and Lee Barbieri is his name. He grew up in Westwood in Islington. His father still lives in Islington. And he lives in Dover, and he said, you know what, I'd love to move back to Westwood. And we combined forces on this project, and we eventually brought a third person in, also a longtime resident of Westwood, which brings us here. And the reason I tell you this is because we're not, when you listen to the presentation tonight and the questions, and we're not your typical developers. We're not here to just build a development for inexpensively as possible and sell it for as much money as possible and then leave. these are going to be our neighbors. The three of us are going to be living in this development. We're going to see our neighbors every day. We're going to see all the abutters every day. We want to do right by everyone. So it's important to us that this is done right. And you know, all I'll say is we're very excited to try to get this project underway. With that, I'm going to introduce Mark Romanowitz, who has been involved from the very beginning. We were really fortunate to bring Mark onto the team. He has decades of experience with this type of product, and I'm not going to speak for you, so I'm going to let you start the presentation. And
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Board. My name is Mark Romanowitz, and what we're looking at is the High Meadow slide that shows the one of the typical homes that we're proposing at 215 High Street. You can see the site plan there, and a brief description about what we expect at High Meadows, a 55 age-restricted community, exceptional quality, traditional beauty. It's just, they're great little homes, and we'll have some more pictures to see as we go through this presentation. One of the things we looked at was the OSRD, and we came to the board a year and a half ago with a preliminary review and got an approval from the board to build this community. So we went through the OSRD four-step process, which we'll highlight further on in this presentation. It's an age-restricted, over 55. All the homes have first-floor masters, and really spectacular living space for the first floor. We do have a guest bedroom in all these homes, and we really have designed it for maintenance-free living. All the common areas will be taken care of by a homeowners association, so from the inside of the home, there's nothing to take care of except for your grocery shopping and pulling in the garage and your driveway shoveled and snow plowed on the roads, so it's really comfortable living. The home design, traditional New England architecture, the density of 19 homes. There's 8 single-family homes and 11 single-family homes and 8 townhomes, which we'll show you in more detail as we get further in. As part of the OSRD, we have 3 affordable homes required for this proposal, and right now we have secured 2 off-site homes, and there'll be 1 located on the community and one of the townhomes. The land was originally a little bit smaller than the 400,000 square feet as required by the OSRD, and we've secured a piece of land which we'll show you in the following slides. So that's the site, location, High Street, Summer Street, and the site is right there, highlighted in green. We went through the yield calculation, which is part of the OSRD bylaw. So you can see the existing parcel is under 400,000 square feet. The additional land that we've added gets it just over 400. And we go through the calculation that's outlined in the OSRD. I think as the peer reviewer pointed out, we have a slight mistake in the math, but it's still, the bottom line is that the total is appropriate, and we'll get that in the next round of revisions. We'll make sure that's updated, but it was a minor fractional difference. The base density was the same at 5, and the bonus is the same, and the total, we have a total we could build there of 20 homes. Existing conditions, maybe Scott, he wants to talk about that a little bit. Scott is with Holmgren Engineering, and he'll talk about the existing conditions a little bit, and also the open space, which we didn't include an open space plan in the presentation. So I think it would be great if Scott talked about the open space, and we'll take more time on our next round to get the details. So I'll let Scott speak to that a little bit.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Scott Rogers, J.K. Holmgren Engineering. As far as existing conditions go, the site has a rise in topography from High Street. About a third into the site, there's a high point approximately in this area here. So there's a watershed that drains towards High Street and a watershed that drains towards the back. There is a pond back there with bordering vegetated wetland. We'll be going to the Conservation Commission. We'll get into that a little bit later, but we have located trees on the site. For the most part, there are trees located on the outskirts, and there are some wooded areas towards the rear. But in general, the site is mostly cleared. There are some large trees on site, but for the most part, the site is partially cleared. There are 2 residents on the property, and one located here, as well as one located here, and there are some larger outbuildings for the horse stable facility. As far as the open space requirements, and what we've done here is, as Mark had mentioned, with the existing parcel and the acquisition of the parcel towards the north side, that gets you to a total square foot of 401,259.
I'll get you that slide.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, you can see it there. 401,259 square feet. So basically, you can see the outline of the open space area in darker green around the perimeter mostly. That area in itself is a little over almost 207,000 square feet, which is, when you add in the amenities area shown right here, gets you to about 51.6% for the green space, the open space. We didn't include it in the calculation, but just for reference, the island in the middle is a little over 7,000 square feet, and that would bring you up to 53.3%. Just as a reference as well, non-buildable and wetland areas on the site is a maximum requirement of 75%. We're not even close to that. As I mentioned, there is a wetland area towards the back surrounding that existing pond. And then there is some small areas of pavement within the buffer zone, mostly in the front here. And that maximum allowed is 5%. We're underneath that requirement as well. We're about 4.5% on that.
Thank you. So existing conditions, thank you, Scott, that was helpful. And the landscape plan, Tom Miner is the landscape architect with Hawk Design. He's been involved in the preliminary plan as well as this one. He spent some time on the site. So Tom, would you mind just kind of telling us what the thinking is with this plan? And
Good evening, Board. Tom Miner with Hawk Design. I've had the pleasure of working with Mark for over 30 years on several communities. The best thing I love about Mark is he's always pushing us to do more landscaping and spending his money. So this is a preliminary landscape plan, conceptual, just touching on the basics. I guess it's easier to do this. As you can see, the road is a meandering curvilinear road coming in with our first view at a green space up here. And as you get further into the site, you've got a cul-de-sac heavily planted in here. The existing trees remain wherever we can, and to augment that, where the proposed drainage allows, we've proposing mounding landscaped berms between the entry and this first home, between these homes and our neighbors, and between these homes and our neighbors. As we come in, we've got the amenity area, as I said. That'll, at this point, is showing a seating patio with perhaps a fire pit, maybe a stone wall to create some berming separation between some of the units in the street. It's got a little bit of an activity lawn for bocce, cornhole type of activities, parking adjacent to it. As far as the street tree common area planning, it's not what I was expecting there. It'll be a more informal planting. It'll be an alternating flowering deciduous shade trees, varying species. As you go up the street, it won't be all planted with just, one type of tree. Same thing in the buffers. The buffers will be planted up and down the berms to give the variety. It'll be a combination of evergreen trees and shade trees, predominantly native material. The shade trees are starting out at 2.5 to 3 inch caliper. The evergreen trees are starting out at 6 to 8 feet. Touching on the lighting briefly, we're showing residential scale LED fixtures on 10-foot poles. They're top shielded fixtures to prevent light trespass into the sky. And finally, as we get into the individual landscaping, we've shown a typical single-family home right now. That'll vary as we go on. These 4 unit buildings, we try to always vary the landscaping on each home to make them individualized. It'll vary anyways because of the sun orientation and the location of the homes to create the screening between homes and between the street that we need. But I believe that covers just about everything right now. Thank you.
And Tom has developed some actual individual home plan and townhouse plans. We'll see those further on as we start to look at the architecture for each of those. The 4-step process, so step 1 is identified in the OST areas, identify the conservation areas. The core of the site was really developed as part of the stable, so it really was easy to pick where we should be developing because there's existing structures and really all the clearing is done through the center of that site. So that was the first task, is identify that. Second task was to locate the housing. And this is very similar to the way I've handled land planning over the years in different locations, from New Seabury to Pine Hills to Wentworth by the Sea. Try to find out where the best place to have these homes orient. In the backs of all of these homes is really the living space. And you'll see there's decks and screen porches located there. And there'll either be a patio when it's a walkout, or there'll be a deck a patio where it's on grade, and a walkout would be a deck in that location. So our footprints are a little deceiving right now because it includes that deck and that screen porch, so they're a little larger than the house actually is. So placing that house in that location. Next was to align the roads. So it's nice to get the back of the home at a grade that we are comfortable with, and then have the road really work towards the front elevation of the house. Versus a lot of times you'll see land planning developed by the road going in first and the homes go in second. So try to drive that so these living spaces really have great views and sit there. Step 4 is to draw in easement lines or lot lines. As part of the OSRD, what they want to do, we're not necessarily saying there'll be lot lines there, but those are illustrative as far as the bylaw is concerned, just to understand what's happening. So some of the lots that are here get the 75-foot frontage that's outlined in the OSRD. As we go around the radius, there'll be less, and it is contemplated in the bylaw that you could give us approval to do something with less frontages because of that radius, and they're trying to keep the homes compact and keeping some open space on the perimeter. The townhomes, much like you've approved over at Clabwood Street, the townhomes don't meet the requirement of, I think it's 7,500 square feet as far as the smaller town attached products. So this is a little bit less, and it'd be very similar to what you've approved at Clabwood Street. These lots could easily, well, all of these lots really hover just under 10,000 square feet. And we could adjust things, but that's what we think is the best layout right now, so. And we'll work through those details in the coming weeks. That's the open space plan that Scott spoke to you about. We apologize that wasn't included in the filing. I know that the peer reviewer was wondering where we were with that as well. So we developed this plan. We'll be sharing it with the peer reviewer as well as the board right away. We wanted to be clear that we didn't forget about that. So that's the landscape plan again that Tom developed. We ended up with that proposed plan. And here's some pictures of the existing architecture that we built in Weston. Very low profile, these single family homes. That house there is about 24 feet tall. It's a story and a half. There's a guest bedroom. Actually, in those homes, there's 2 guest bedrooms on the second floor, and there's a master on the first floor suite. We've modified the plan to make it a 2-bedroom house. We have different styles. One is a traditional cape with a front entry porch, one with a farmer's porch. So we have different styles, and we introduced these. We have 2 sizes now. We've looked at one that is the current plan that we used from Weston, and we've designed one that's much smaller but has all the same features. That particular style was our best seller. It has a great floor plan. It really lives comfortably for empty nesters. Full-size 2-car garage. The dormers over the garage are just decorative, but they really add to the flavor of the architecture that's going on there. That's the floor plan. So it's a good footprint. When you have a first floor master, the homes do have a first floor that's pretty substantial as far as square footage, but great living space. More traditional living room, dining room, walk-in. Master suite is all the way over here. You walk into this space, so when you walk in the front door, you actually see through the home, and you get to see some of that great space that we'll be providing in the back that will be used to either the landscape mounds or some of the wetlands or the woodlands. So family room, kitchen, breakfast area, laundry. You enter in from the garage. And we're building these homes. As you notice, they were a very low profile on the elevation. We build these with what I call a reverse brick shelf. So the floor is actually submerged down, and we have that, we're able to walk in from the garage, is 1 step in from the garage versus our homes that we all live in are 3 or 4 steps up to the garage. And the front door is simply 2 steps up, very short, shallow steps, and that a little more expensive, but it helps that profile stay low. It's really comfortable for the empty nester to walk in and out of the home. Second floor, so very small. You can see the roof of the big house. It continues there. Loft, guest bedroom, ensuite bathroom. So fairly standard sort of cape style with the clipped ceilings and the dormers. And we have, this was shown this in a walkout condition where they're finished basements. You'll have a family room, an exercise room, home office, a den. It's great space that people get to use for building it out and making it a great place to have entertainment on the lower level when grandkids visit or the family has an event. We've seen that happen so many times. So there's that landscape plan that Tom developed with the front entry, driveway, brick walkway coming up. That's the entry over the front door. Privacy screening on both sides to make sure that we get some screening between the homes. And that's the back, either patio, which would be a brick patio, or if it's a deck and a walkout condition, that'd be a deck, and that's an optional screen porch. So that footprint is what's shown on the site plan. So they get a little bit close to the open space line, but when you really think about it, they're, the place that everybody lives and breathes is right there when they're outside in the summer months. And the family room is in this location. So the house really does live to the rear. This is the other home styles we're building at the site. They're townhomes, and they're actually 4 homes clustered together. Those are the common walls that we're showing, and the garages are inset. And I think I showed this to the board prior, but those are inset, so you don't, when you pull up to a townhouse, a lot of times all you see is garage doors across the front elevation. So these are well hidden, and when we look at the site plan, you'll understand how. And the front elevation, this is about a 25-foot highest peak on this elevation. And you don't pick up the relief that happens, so this is outboard, these are recessed, and that's out. But you'll see, and it matches the architecture of the single family. But when you look at the site plan that Tom developed, what happens is, so that dashed line at the top of the screen is roughly the center line of the road, and these are the driveways for these 2 residents. And you can see where the red arrows are, there'll be 2 cars of parking in a garage, 2 cars outside. So every resident has space for 2 guests to come and visit. There is some guest parking as well. But now you can really see what happens when you start to get street trees that are around this and this parking area and the center piece between the two garages that come out with the landscape and a tree. It really creates some privacy even for that small area where you're parking. Each of these homes has a outdoor courtyard space that is under roof, and then partially outside, that's a courtyard fence that they can do some of their exclusive use planting and living. That's where their outdoor space would be. And then it, center between the two, there's a pair of them also. That happens with the garage doors, and the last one, that one butts up against, is adjacent to one of the single-family homes. The interior finishes are very high quality. We started out doing something unique with customization for the interior of the home. So I'll show you a schedule that I put together, but usually we'll meet with a homeowner from 3 to 4 weeks, gather all their information at one time frame, and when they're done with that selection process, we take all the information, we build the home. Rather than going back and forth and having a 6 or 8 month time frame of selections and find the fittings and do everything, everything's gathered at one time. Makes it easier for them, makes it easier for us, so we can actually put the house into production and get it built in a timely manner. Again, this is Weston. You get a picture of how the roads are 20-foot wide throughout the community, and there's no sidewalks. There is a lot of lawn area, which is unique on this site at 215 High as well as in Weston. We have a lot of space. We're not your typical empty nester community where the homes are very close to the street, so you have to really force the landscape in, you have to force the house in. We have a lot of room to be able to landscape, make it comfortable, actually have some lawn that looks great out in the site. That's another home that we've built that's very similar. You can see the trees are a substantial size so that they break the roof line, which really makes a big difference when those trees start to break the gutter line and bring the house to scale. Not that the house needs much to bring it down because it's already fairly small. That's the amenity area that Tom was talking about. That is located in this lawn area right here. So you can see there's some parking spaces here. There's walkway, patio, fire pit, and a bocce court, and there is a lawn for other lawn activities if we want to have that happen in that location. Before we go through the waivers, I just want to go back to the site plan real quick and tell you what I've met with the fire department, and we've talked about emergency access coming in this location. And from this location to the end of the road, it's less than 500 feet. So this emergency road helps to satisfy that 500 foot requirement. I've met with the water department, and they've asked us to put in an 8-inch water line throughout and interconnect with an existing easement that heads on the east side of the property, so we can interconnect and not have a complete dead-end loop at that location. And one of the suggestions was that the hydrant gets placed, one of the hydrants, we're putting 3 on the site, one of the hydrants gets closer to the end, so we're able to flush that line out. But that interconnection with the current cross-country main that goes out to Grove Street will be very helpful to our system as well. So, fire department, water. The police raised an issue about speed limit changes, which we've passed on to Jeff Durk, and he'll speak to that. We've looked at the entrance road. He was concerned about the traffic pattern on 109 has been adjusted. The striping has been adjusted out there. So there was a neighbor who was concerned about, it's difficult for them to drive into their driveway, slow down enough to take the right-hand turn into their driveway as they're heading westbound on 109. So we did look at the radius on the entrance. Right now, I think it's only 20 feet radius. We're probably going to increase that to a 30-foot radius, so large trucks, homeowners that are coming in don't feel like they're, have to jam on their brakes to make that turn. So that adjustment will go through with the peer review engineer in the coming days and weeks. I think that was everything. Let's go through the waivers that we have. If that's helpful. Would that be helpful for the board to go through the waivers?
It would.
Okay. So the first one is the 500-foot, oh, this is, I'm sorry, this is between two streets of 500 feet. So, is that right, Scott? Is this one, I can't quite see that. This first one, the waiver is between streets, so we're looking for that. And I don't think Summer Street is within the range, but there is a small paper subdivision next door. It's actually a driveway for two homes that I think is the issue. And I don't have a site plan to show you where that is, but we'll take a look at that in a minute. And then the next one is, no ways shall be within 40 feet of a lot line. That's another way we're looking at our lot line. I'm reaching over to look at the site plan. But the entrance road is next to the lot line at that location. Minimum pavement width of 22 feet. We're asking for 20 feet plus a, probably not a Cape Cod berm. Cape Cod berm is molded separately. We like the monolithic berm because it's cast at the same time that the asphalt's, so it's a slight bevel. It's consistent with the top coat. It doesn't get plowed up in the winter because it's, it's part of the initial installation of the asphalt. Very similar to a Cape Cod, but not quite as tall. So that's where we're headed with the, on the road width. Next one was a requirement of maximum dead end. So we spoke about that. That's with the emergency access road that we're looping in the back of those townhomes. That gives us the ability for the fire department to have access in two directions and minimize the length to 500 feet. As part of our initial filing with the town in the preliminary, we were able to show a proof plan, I think what the planning board was looking at. A proof plan is, can we build this community with another product with only a 500-foot road? We could. We can do that with townhomes, and the maximum road length in total would be under 500 feet. It wasn't our desire to do that, but one of the requirements was to come up with that proof plan to show that. Sidewalks on both sides. That's one of the requirements for the town, is to have sidewalks on both sides of the road. I think that design's a big element when it comes to this. The community we built in Weston has got 69 homes. There is no sidewalks. It's all 20-foot road, but we have a lot of lawn area throughout and landscape. And it's interesting that where the neighbors walk around, the homeowners walk through the community, and the neighbors from the community, the surrounding community, actually walk through because it's a pleasant place from the walk, and it's the calming aspect of narrow roads and curving and just a beautiful place to be. So they actually walk in that community. Kind of counterintuitive when I know that the town has been on a bit of a push to get sidewalks throughout the communities. Vertical curbing, as I described, we'd like to put in this monolithic berm that's part of the casting of the asphalt. The requirement is for a vertical granite curb. We hadn't talked about this, but we probably would have, the entrance would probably have some kind of a sloped granite curb, something that's a little more durable, snowplows, trucks, cars entering, but we'll need to review that with the design peer review engineer. 3 foot 6 inches of cover over the drain lines. Scott, is there anything else that we should talk about on that as far as the cover on the drainage? Is there anything that would be worth mentioning on that?
Just helps to minimize some of the
Yeah. We recognize the drainage on site is going to be difficult. We're going to have to really put our thinking caps on to make this work. We've done some preliminary soil testing, and we're scheduled next week to do some serious amount of investigation on site to really understand what's out there. The roadway binder top course. So right now your bylaw states a 5-inch total thickness of asphalt. We'd like to do 4 inches, which is 2.5 and 1.5, and we've got a little bit less than that in Weston. It seemed to have worked well. with a 3.5-inch total, so we propose to do a 4-inch, similar to what was approved at Clapboard Street. Trails, so we want to speak about this a little bit as well, Michael, but the community is, and I'm going to switch over to a site plan for a minute here, because I think it would be helpful to look at that. With the way the site's set up to work, it's narrow and lineal. We don't connect up to any common parks or open space that's controlled by the town or other public agencies. So it's one thing when you're adjacent to that to have a trail that would interconnect with other trail systems, but we don't have that. And frankly, as I mentioned, the homes live to the back, very much so to the back. So having trails in the back of this property or along the back of the home would be very difficult for us to introduce, because it really affects each individual, even on the townhomes, the values of those, what they see as valuable to those homeowners.
I'd say just one more comment, because,
Yeah.
just one more comment about the trails. We've been very sensitive to all the abutters' concerns, and when talking to them about this particular issue, it's not just our backyards. The walking trail would basically be in their backyard as well. So, neither party really wants someone walking to the backyard on either side of the property line. So we're sensitive to that, just as a practical matter. I mean, I know I walk my dog almost every day, and, I would simply use, if I'm gonna take a long walk, I would use the sidewalk from High Street and walk to the town. I do that now, but I don't have the benefit of a sidewalk on Summer Street. So, it's such a small community, and given the feedback we got from the abutters, we thought it wouldn't really be appropriate.
Thank you, Michael. While we're on this plan too, we have met with all the neighbors, and this plan, we need to adjust some of the screening, do additional screening in this location. We met with the neighbor here, he's got an existing mound, we might need to add some more screening in this location. We do show some trees here, but actually the view both ways is actually gonna be pretty nice, so we might minimize some of this, but maximize the screening along these edges, because that's where it's really, there's a house that's located just to the west of the site, this location, you can see this location. So we'll enhance that plan on the next level of planning, because I think we spoke about the screening when we initially presented this, and we want to make sure we follow through with that. So I'll get to the last of the waivers. And the last piece is the recreational amenities primary for the residents of the OSRD, including but not limited to a community center, swimming pool, beach, tennis court, or children's playground. We show a small area, and I think initially we had a gazebo in the middle of the site. We got some reaction from the then board, thought it wasn't really the best situation, that we should look at it, and we've adjusted the road to have that lawn area, to have a gathering place there with the fire pit, the bocce court, and the lawn sports that could happen out there. Nothing, we won't have a football game out there, it's not quite big enough, but we will have some smaller lawn activity out there. So that's the waiver list. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Michael? No? So Jeff Dirk is here from Vanessa and Associates to talk about traffic.
Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Dirk. I'm a partner with Vanessa and Associates, and as Mark had mentioned, we conducted a transportation study for the project. A little different probably than the typical transportation studies that you've seen. This is a very low traffic generator from the standpoint of net impact on the roadway. We're predicting about 80 peak hour trips. 80 daily trips. The peak hour trips are going to be somewhere between 10 and 11 peak hour trips. And those are numbers that would coincide with the roadway peak hours, so the typical peak hours when people are coming from are going to work in the morning and coming home in the afternoon. And the reason for those low numbers is that the peak for this type of use, given that it's age qualified, it typically occurs later in the day. So the actual peak hour for this use is somewhere around the noontime hours. So it's either 11:30 to 12:30 or somewhere between 12 and 1. And that's pretty statistically found at a number of studies have been done at this type of use for the age qualified use, as well as monitoring studies that we've done at similar communities. And you heard Mark mention the Pine Hills and New Seabury. So we do traffic monitoring for those developments, and that's what we find. When residents have a choice of times to travel, they don't go and travel during the commuter peak hours when the traffic volumes are the highest. So again, 80 daily vehicle trips, peak hour trips around 10 to 11, so it's one vehicle every 5 to 6 minutes, and that's not accounting for the traffic that the existing uses generate. So if we account for that, it's really almost a wash in terms of the amount of traffic that we're talking about. An important thing that we found in terms of looking at what's going on in High Street today, you heard Mark talk about the restriping that took place, and that's probably one of the more significant things that's happened out there in terms of what we'll call as an improvement. So that has resulted in some reduction in the queuing, primarily towards the downtown area. You still have queuing heading towards the Summer Street traffic signal. The operation of that signal and the signal at Louderbrook, really that's controlling how this section of the roadway really operates. So the roadway today, High Street, again, looking at 80 daily trips associated with this project. High Street today accommodates just over it's about 21,700 vehicles per day. So it's a large volume of traffic. And it's important as you look at that number, again, we're adding 80 trips on top of that daily number, so it's not a significant increase in traffic. But focusing on those peak hours, in the morning is when the traffic volumes are at the highest level, and you're probably familiar with that. Most of it's heading towards the interchange area. It's about 1,700 vehicles during a 1 hour period in the morning that's heading in that direction. So when you think about that from the standpoint of when the peak is happening from this project's traffic, it's between 12 and 1. So the nice thing about this use and where it's located, when you have these peak directional commuter flows heading towards the interchange in the morning and then coming away from the interchange in the evening, our traffic is not peaking at that same time period. It's actually peaking off of that. So when you have limited capacity on a roadway, what you want to do is introduce uses that don't generate traffic that coincides with the peak on the roadway. And that's what this use really does. So it's a benefit from that standpoint. So focusing on safety and the access to the site, in conjunction with those traffic volume measurements, of course, the critical thing for us, you heard Mark talk about, we want to make sure that his vehicles are entering the site. They're doing so slowly as they're entering, but not so slowly that they're causing backups happening on High Street. So the design of that corner radius is very important, so that right turn as they come in, you slow down, but not excessively slow down so that you have traffic backing up on a High Street. The other important thing is sight lines at the driveway. So we want to make sure that as you're exiting this community, that you have adequate line of sight for both approaching the driveway, but also as you're exiting and looking to the left or right to be able to exit safely. And if you're driving along High Street, if someone pulls out, you can see that vehicle. And the same thing, if you're exiting, you can see a vehicle that's approaching you and make sure that there's a sufficient gap to be able to pull out and make a left or right-hand turn. So you heard Mark mention the speed limit on the roadway itself, and so we had worked with the police department and understand the posted speed limit is 40 miles an hour in this area. So as we measure the speed of traffic on the roadway, we measure the speed over a 2-day period, and so if there's a little over 21,000 vehicles per day on that road. So we're measuring the speed of over 40,000 vehicles basically over that 2-day time period. And the prevailing travel speed, so the speed at which the majority of the vehicles traveled at this location, was pretty close to the posted speed limit. It ranged somewhere between 38 and 40 miles an hour, so it's consistent with that posted speed. So at that speed, you need to be able to see a minimum of 305 feet looking to the left or right, exiting the project, but also as you're approaching the intersection. So if you're driving along High Street and someone pulled out of the site and their car just stalled right in the middle of High Street, as long as you can see that vehicle at a distance of 305 feet, you can see it, perceive it, apply the brakes and stop if you're driving at 40 miles an hour. And so the same thing, if you're exiting the site, as long as you can see 305 feet in either direction, that gives you sufficient distance to be able to pull out of the site safely without being struck by a vehicle on High Street. So the measured sight lines approaching the intersection exceeded 400 feet, and we need a minimum of 305 feet. In fact, in a lot of instances, they were closer to 500 feet. So there is sufficient sight line. One of the issues as well is we know that traffic backs up. So if it backs up past the driveway, there's a question about sight lines relating to the backups that happen. So if traffic backs up to the intersection, basically that in some instances might block your sight line. One of the interesting things that happens with the restriping that actually took place is out there, we have one lane approaching the driveway heading towards the downtown. So if traffic is backed up in that direction, obviously you can't get out of the site. But if there's a gap coming out of there, then there's two lanes heading towards the interchange area. So if you're able to get into the first travel lane, because traffic is clear in that direction heading towards the Summer Street intersection, then you're able to see sufficient distance to see a vehicle that's coming at you heading towards the interchange. So the actual queuing does not block sight lines, because if the queue blocks the driveway, you can't get out. You have to wait for that queue to clear, and then you have sufficient sight line for looking at traffic that's heading in the eastbound direction as well. So that's kind of a summary of the findings of the traffic study itself. I know your review consultant had some comments on it, and I don't believe they'd received our most recent update, which was published and submitted, I think, around the 18th of this month, which included the traffic volume data and the speed data that your consultant was looking at. So I think once they've had a chance to look at that information, it will address some of the comments that we received. But I'm happy to answer any questions you have now or when we're all done with the presentation. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
This is a sort of overview of the development schedules, anticipating a spring start. And what you see on the top portion is the building demolition starting in March, bringing the site to grade, just some basic construction schedule looks at this build out. I'm just trying to read that thing. Sorry. Okay, so the one of the things happening at the rear of the site, let's see if I see it. That's a good one to look at. That next item was wetland restoration. At the rear of the site, there's been some accumulation of landscape materials, leaves, earth, some construction debris. A year and a half ago, we did a preliminary review with GZA, did some test pits to make sure there was nothing of risk for us to purchase the property, and it's really nothing there, but it's not buildable material, so we have to remove all of that, and we have to rebuild the edge of this wetland bank. So that'll be part of our notice of intent filing. So part of that schedule showing there is the wetland replication. So there's a fair amount of soils and materials that have to be removed, structural fills put in place, but that's all within the 100-foot buffer and beyond. So we'll have to go through the filing for the notice of intent for that materials there. The next item on the schedule was the site infrastructure, which brings us out through the end of June. At the same time, we'd like to bind to the road just before we start any heavy construction on the homes. And we're also doing the perimeter landscape. I think it would be great if we could get the infrastructure in place, get some of that mounding in place, and build this mounding and do any permanent planting earlier versus later. Sort of work from the outside in, so we get that landscaping in place, we get that screening in place. It protects the neighbors, it protects us, and we're able to get some of that planting established. And as we build out the homes, the next part of the schedule was this last piece of site work is sort of an ongoing process for landscaping, but you can see the homes start here. The blue is the selection process and then the permit application, because we really can't apply for the permit if the homeowner is doing some design changes to the home that include finishes or custom cabinetry, because we want to make sure we include that. So there's 2 months of selections for the first month, apply, anticipating a 30-day turnaround for a permit, and then there's an 8-month build-out. So we're starting in the beginning. What we did in Weston is we had a sequence of what we call even flow production. Every month for the first few months, we start a home. It's, the builder's got to get acquainted with what we're doing and get familiar with the product, and we're on a new site. All that takes a little bit of time. So I anticipated that the first few would be starting on a month basis for the scheduling, and then we'd hopefully get to a 2-week start time frame. So every 2 weeks, we're putting in a foundation, we're building the home and completing it. and it's really, that even flow happens all the way through. And that brings us just about out to 18 months, a little bit more. Obviously, weather and other factors will drive that a little bit, but that's a snapshot of what we anticipate for a development schedule. All I did was put up a summary page for the fiscal impact. It's positive of 318,000. Mark Fougier has done some work in town for these fiscal impact studies, and, there are some costs for police and fire, council and aging departments. The school cost is based on, what Fougier does is he watches about 1,200 homes across the region and monitors empty nester housing. And what he's seen for the percentages for those 1,200 homes, we come up with about a half of a child in our situation. So he just plugged in one school-age child in this location just as a cost to be conservative. The total cost of $29,000, so $288,000 positive, and there is some income that might be generated by the EMS work that happens on site. And that's the presentation.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Abby, are there any comments from staff?
Yes, I think the applicant touched on some of them. We also have Tom Houston here from your peer reviewer. Let's see, as the applicant mentioned, this project also requires a Conservation Commission submission. Also, initial comments from Public Works would be that the Public Works Department would not do the recycling and trash pickup. That would be private removal, same with snow maintenance. I believe the proposal is for this to be a private way, so the town would not be responsible for the maintenance. That would be the homeowners. Another item that you should talk about tonight as you go further in your review is the proposal for the affordability requirement. And you should review the waiver requests, particularly the sidewalk in the community facility. And also the request on the street tree plantings. Typically, you would require trees to be planted every 30 feet on center along the roadway. So you should review that tonight, and you can hear a little bit more on the full details of the proposal from Tom Houston.
Okay, great. At this time, I think having Tom present. Hi, Tom.
Good evening, members of the board. Tom Houston with PSC, the peer reviewer for this assignment. In general, we found that the plans and all the documents submitted are generally well prepared. They comply with standard practice for each of the disciplines. We have a number of comments. I think many of them are readily soluble. There are some more challenging areas, particularly, I think, as was mentioned, the stormwater is going to require some detailed analysis to come up with an acceptable solution. The first several comments we have relate to the relationship between the required minimum open space, which is 50%, and on this project, that amounts to 200,600 some odd square feet of open space. And the bylaw also speaks to lot areas and frontages for the individual residences. Now, these aren't lot area and frontage as it's conventionally defined in the subdivision control law, because there's no requirement for the common driveway on site to be accepted as a street. So technically, lot areas and frontages only apply if they're lots fronting on a street. So these are kind of lot area and frontage equivalent. And they are 10,000 square feet per single-family detached unit and 7,500 square feet of lot area for the attached single families, and a minimum frontage of 75 feet per dwelling. Under the bylaw, the board has authority to waive the frontage. You are not granted with authority to waive the lot areas. As I mentioned, the open space, and maybe one of the reasons for different views on this, the open space is not really clearly depicted as a parcel on the plans, and neither are the parcels surrounding the residences. But I scaled the open space as about 150,000 square feet. The minimum requirement is over 200,000 square feet. Some of the lot areas were oversized as I scaled them, as I inferred their location. And a couple, like, for example, residence number 7 were undersized. That one had, I thought, about 7,000 square feet. So we asked for a proof plan from the applicant, and over the next few days, we'll be working with them to try to resolve any issues with the competition for land area between lot areas around the individual residences and the 50% open space requirement. In our comment 7, we did mention, and the applicant mentioned it in their presentation, the use of the open space here really is for buffer space. The open space comes quite near the rear of many of the single-family residences here. So there are no trails, but I think if they were to be included, it might be a cause potentially of friction between the homeowners and people walking fairly close to their houses. So in the board's preliminary review of this project and approval, you did specify trails, so that's something that you would have to consider, whether the elimination of trails, given the other attributes of the project, is appropriate. The other thing that the board mentioned in your preliminary approval was the requirement for a community facility. That was not defined in the approval. The applicant mentioned that they endeavored to respond to that by including a lawn area with various potential activities. So the board can evaluate that as to whether or not that was consistent with the intent of your approval, requiring a preliminary, requiring a community facility. One aspect of the zoning bylaw is that for this development, it is required to comply with the land subdivision regulations in terms of both the construction of the street and the construction of the utilities. Based upon the traffic volume generated, this would be regarded as a residential local minor street under the planning board's rules and regulations. There are several ways that the plan does not comply, particularly with the roadway. The applicant in some instances has asked for waivers. One issue that's a little bit of a concern is our comment number 27, where the planning board rules and regulations require a 50-foot leveling area at the intersection. So as the roadway comes down towards High Street, the rules and regs would require a 50-foot leveling area, which helps vehicles stop as they approach High Street. The leveling area provided is somewhat less than 20 feet in this location. The planning board rules and regs would require a 22-foot wide pavement. The applicant is requesting a waiver to 20 feet. We are recommending an increase to 24 feet, as well as restricting parking to one side of the street only. Our rationale is we think there may be somewhat of a higher potential just because of the number of residences at a density which may not be common in some other subdivisions. There may be a tendency for a fair amount of on-street parking. And in terms of emergency vehicle access, if you park a larger vehicle, SUV or something, it's about 6.5 feet wide. If they park a foot off the curbing, that's 7.5 feet. If you do that on both sides of the road, that's 15 feet of the road is being taken up by parking. That only leaves 5 foot to fit an 8.5 foot wide fire truck with mirrors hanging on the outside. So we requested that the pavement be increased to 24 feet and further, that parking only be permitted on one side of the street, and actually at the very end of the cul-de-sac where the radius is small, we suggested in that short area that parking not be allowed at all. In terms of the utility systems, they're generally compliant. We only saw one hydrant on the plan that was submitted. I think the hydrant locations need to be approved by the fire department. And we also recommended that if nothing else, that a hydrant be placed at the end of the roadway, which would facilitate flushing of the main. There wasn't detail provided on the plans in terms of how the water distribution system was to be constructed. We had recommended, and I see that it has happened since we prepared the report, we recommended consultation with the Dedham Westwood Water District, and also recommended that the water mains be 8-inch diameter, cement-lined, bituminous-coated concrete pipe. Sounds like that is the direction that that design element is proceeding towards. Other aspects of non-compliance with the subdivision requirements, as was mentioned, there are no sidewalks proposed on the site. The thing the board should consider, and for those who went on the site walk, you know, there is already a sidewalk on High Street. And particularly where this is a senior community, walking is a common activity. So it might be reasonable to consider at least one sidewalk within the development, which would link up to the sidewalk on High Street. If that's done, I understand the board has a policy of asking for contributions to a sidewalk fund, but right now there are no sidewalks, and it may be an amenity to include them. A roadway of this nature in the subdivision regulations does require vertical granite curbing. The applicant is proposing a sort of monolithic concrete berm, and I'm sure that in different projects, the advantages and disadvantages of these have been discussed. Clearly, the granite curbing has the advantage of better controlling stormwater, of being a higher visibility edge of pavement if it's under poor light conditions or under storm conditions. But it is more expensive to install, and some people contend that it is more difficult to maintain. An advantage to having the granite curbs also is that they're easily integratable with granite throat stones for the catch basins, and they significantly augment the capacity of the catch basins and also provide a backup that prevents the grate from being clogged. So the subdivision regulations also require that reinforced concrete pipe be used for the drainage system. In terms of the traffic study that was submitted, the study that we had when we prepared our report did not include the supplemental study that Mr. Dirk prepared mid-September, but it was just provided to us today. We did have a chance to look at that, and the supplemental study does address many of the omissions that we were concerned with. As a kind of minor item, I believe that the actual trip generation for the project on a 24-hour basis is about 111 trips. That's a little bit higher than even the supplemental traffic study projects. The reason for that difference, and it's 30 or so trips, is that an equation has been published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers for the 24-hour traffic volume. And the ITE recommended procedure is to use the equations when they're published. So Mr. Dirk used the average rate. If you use the equations, you get a slightly higher value, 111 trips per day. That particular number is not used, for example, in the operations analysis of the intersections. It's more to just understand the total impact of the project on a 24-hour basis. So there's a slight difference there. The supplemental analysis that was done does give us existing traffic volumes, and they are paired with the trips generated by the project to get a sort of adding the trips to the current traffic volumes. The more conventional way to do this is to do a future build scenario. 7 years in the future, add background growth and other factors to the existing volumes, project them forward 10 years, and then add the generated trips to that. That wasn't done here, but again, the total trip generation is pretty small. Even though there is a very heavy traffic volume on High Street, nonetheless, the intersection does operate at acceptable levels of service. It operates at level C and level D. C is in cat, D is in dog. I'm sure that you have familiarity with the levels of service. Levels of service for intersections range from A to F. They have the same meanings as A to F on a report card. Level of service D is generally considered the minimum acceptable level of service, and the intersection here operates at level of service C and D. If you were to project these numbers forward, I do not anticipate that those levels of service or delay would measurably change, because right now the levels of service are sort of mid-range in the delay range that's used to assign the levels of service. So I think a slight increase in the background traffic probably wouldn't change the end answer, which is that the intersection is operating at acceptable levels of service. The site distance analysis in the supplemental volume is now based upon measuring the speed of vehicles passing the site on actually a 48-hour basis. The measured speeds were 38 and 40 miles per hour eastbound, westbound. The original analysis used the posted speed limit. They were done for 40 miles an hour, but the actual counts have verified that that analysis is adequate. The stopping site distance and the intersection site distance here are adequate if you look at it as an empty roadway. But as was mentioned, if vehicles queue in front of the site, particularly in the outside lane, and you are trying to emerge from the driveway and take a left, your sight distance looking towards vehicles approaching from the right may be blocked or partially blocked, depending on the position of the nearest vehicles in the queue, particularly, for example, if the nearest vehicle was a truck, your sight distance would be measurably reduced. But in terms of the sight distance available just on the roadway itself, that is adequate for both stopping site distance and intersection site distance. One thing we added in terms of the comments that were received, one of them being from the post office, they were saying that a common mailbox facility is going to be required. So we would suggest that one be located on the site, ideally on the inbound side with a pull-out spot so the residents can stop and receive their mail. Stormwater is probably the most challenging issue here. One thing, the initial calculations that were submitted were done with a lower rainfall intensity than the town requires. There are 3 common sources of rainfall that are used these days. One of them is TP40, which is data from the 60s and somewhat limited in nature. And NOAA, who has published a new Atlas 14, regards that as superseded. It was that smaller and older data that was used in the initial drainage calculations. What the town requires is the data from the Northeast Climate Center, also called Cornell curves. And the comparative rainfall, what was used was 7 inches for the 100-year event, and it should be 8.85 inches for the 100-year event. So that's a 26% increase. So all things being equal, the on-site infiltration facilities have to get bigger to meet that increased rainfall intensity requirement. The other issue related to the underground infiltration facilities, the stormwater handbook requires that there be, for facilities this size, 3 test pits per infiltration facility. There were 5 test pits taken for the overall site as a whole, and only one of those is within the footprint of an infiltration facility. There are also roof water recharge facilities at each one of the houses, and we don't have a good feeling for what the soils are like in those locations. So all other things being equal, we need something like 17 test pits in the 6 major infiltration facilities on the site. The one test pit we have, which is in the front infiltration facility approximately here, one of DEP's requirements is that the bottom of the infiltration facility has to be a minimum of 2 feet above bedrock. In that particular location, the bottom of the facility actually projects 4.3 feet into the bedrock. So that entire facility has to be redesigned, maybe relocated, and that's one of the larger facilities on the site. There's another facility back here near the wetland, and the bottom of that facility is only 2 feet above the surface of the wetland. So we need a whole bunch of soil tests here really to confirm the design of the stormwater system, either because of seasonal high groundwater, depth to bedrock, and also the textural classification of the soils there in terms of confirming the infiltration rates that were used in the design of the facilities. And until those tests are done, we really can't confirm the feasibility of the structures that are shown on the site plan. We did take a look at the issue of bedroom counts. The applicant proposes to restrict the number of bedrooms to 2 per unit. There were a couple of rooms on 2 floors in both of the models that we thought might be easily convertible to a bedroom. Clearly, if the board issues a favorable decision on this project, then the decision could specifically limit the number of bedrooms, which would be enforceable in the future by the building commissioner. Perhaps an additional level of protection, and this is commonly used in Title V systems where the number of bedrooms need to be restricted. That would be to require a covenant running with the land on each unit that would restrict the number of bedrooms to 2. So, in terms, jumping back to transportation issues for a moment, a few things that I think should be added and they have yet to be addressed. One is a transportation demand management plan for the construction phase of the project. There are things that can be done, like, for example, requiring carpools or requiring construction workers to be transported in multi-person vehicles to the site. An overall transportation demand management plan can be developed, which just cuts down the construction-related traffic going to and from the site. I think it might be appropriate to look at restrictions on truck routes in terms of requiring most of the trucks to approach and leave the site to and from the east. That's to and from Route I-95, or as some of us still call it, Route 128. We also recommend that consideration be given to restricting heavy truck traffic during peak traffic hours. I realize that's burdensome on the applicant because they want their truck traffic to be going particularly in the morning peak hours, but it is a quite congested segment of High Street there. So restricting construction-related traffic during peak hours may be something that has to be considered and implemented. Our comment number 81 relates to the swept path analysis that was provided. It shows that a fire truck can negotiate all the turns on the site. However, the wheelbase on the vehicle that's pictured is only 20 feet. And what we find most fire departments use as a vehicle to emulate a fire truck is an AASHTO Bus 40 vehicle, which has a wheelbase of 30 feet. So the swept path analysis works well, but we think that should be redone with a vehicle that's approved by the fire department. In terms of the waivers, the overall street length from High Street to the end of the modified cul-de-sac is 870 feet. It is approximately 500 feet from the point where the emergency access road intersects with the primary access drive. So the dead-end street system, excluding the emergency access drive, is 500 feet, although the total length is 870 feet. Comment 86 relates again to the sidewalk waiver and the opportunity of either not waiving the sidewalks or waiving only one sidewalk with a contribution to the sidewalk fund. Comment 87 mentions the vertical granite curbing. We've discussed the advantages and disadvantages. Comment 88 relates to the waiver request for the 3.5 foot of cover over the drain lines. I just need that to be quantified in terms of the extent of the system for which the waiver is sought. And our final comment actually is just a request for earthwork calculations. So those are kind of the high points of our report. To be pleased to respond to any questions or concerns.
That's great, thank you. I guess my initial question is, so the applicant, so you'll respond to those comments? And then how will we see those comments? So will you link up the itemized number so that we can see what each one is? Just for ease of review for us? Okay. So I guess we can open up to the board for any comments. So Dave, did you want to lead off?
All right. Well, we have a lot of information here, so I have a feeling we will be continuing the discussion beyond tonight. So I wanted to a couple of things. So I've seen this plan proceed through several stages now, and it's definitely, I feel like it has improved, especially with the roadway design. I know at one point there was asphalt everywhere and like a spider sort of thing going on. So I think that that's improved a lot. And it is also, by bringing the development in tighter kind of to where the farm was, it fits the idea of the open space plan. It's like you're building on top of what had already been developed. So I think that's a good thing. I do think we need the sidewalk. I think that the 20-foot width is fine, but that there should be a sidewalk at least on one side. When you're talking about parking restrictions, I would say no parking along there. It's a driveway. I don't think you're wanting to see cars parked along that stretch anyway. And I think that people will be backed up to get onto High Street in the morning. It's people are going to be working, and I think that you need the expanded curb radius there to make it safer to get in and out of there. But I think you need that sidewalk because people will be wanting to walk down to the sidewalk that's on High Street. You talked about the lawn. Everyone has a lawn, but that's not so great for people who are unsure of their footing, if they have walkers, if they're in wheelchairs and all that. I think there's a need for a way to connect all the residents of this to the sidewalk on High Street so that they can get out and about that way. So I would hope that something could be done like we did with the other open space development where we had a concern about that. I think there's enough people living in there that there will be significant amount of cars coming in and out, and having a place for people to walk that's separate from walking down the street is desirable. I want to just kind of quickly hit a bunch of these things. The stormwater management, I'm very concerned that I think a lot of planning is going into this, but we can never let there be another development where it's where the stormwater is not handled correctly and we have flooding basements and all. I think that's one of our obligations in some of the projects we've seen that weren't carefully stewarded. And you guys are going to be living there, so it is clearly something that should be a focus as we come back. Have a clear plan on how to avoid that, and that should also involve the granite curbing. I'm not sure if that's good or bad. If you have granite curbing, it causes the stormwater to rush in one direction. So I think we'd be open to different ideas on how best to handle that. I think that just sort of thinking about the trails, I know earlier we talked about in previous versions of this, where's the open space? Okay, can there be trails around there? I mean, I feel like I'm good with this approach because of there's nowhere to go. Like if we were to have a trail through there, in addition to probably not being desired by the abutters and even the people living there, there's nowhere for it to go. So I think that the focus on having this large, relatively significant buffer with good plantings and trees that are where it looks natural, and preserving the tree line out from the street back to the water, I think that's consistent with the idea of the open space residential development. I think that look at the lofts and dens issue. I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but it does look like there's a lot of space for potentially third bedrooms and stuff. So that's something that has to be carefully addressed through what we can do as a board, maybe through the homeowners association covenants with the land. All those issues need to make sure that that those lofts and dens aren't easily converted into bedrooms. And we had talked in previous meetings about the common area, and so what we've got here, I think this is an improvement over the gazebo in the middle, the tiny gazebo in the middle. And I would actually say that when we talk about the mailbox too, maybe that makes sense to have if there has to be a community mailbox, you've got parking spaces there, you've got a common grass area with the bocce pits and all, maybe that's where the mailboxes go. So I think that's my initial comments, and I'd say that, yeah, we have a lot of stuff to address, so we'll look forward to future responses and revisions.
Did you want to?
No, I
Or Tom?
echo a lot of what Dave said. I think the sidewalk is important, especially for children visiting in the winter. Maybe limiting or preventing parking on the streets at all, whatever you call it, the extended driveway. So.
Okay. One important one is I need to do a site visit. There was one scheduled for the other day, but that did not work for my schedule. The community facility, I was wondering if there were any other ideas beyond that, or if you worked on managing a place that does have a community facility that might be visible. I don't know if the one in Weston has one.
Yes. Yeah, there's a community building there.
Okay. So you mentioned, I'm just repeating that without the microphone. So you do have one in Weston. So I'm going to, and if you could send the address to that to Abby, I'm going to do a site visit to that as well. And it would also be interesting, I know that these are going to be homeowners, but if the interest in solar panels, if you were considering that, I think we should be looking at this in all the projects that we look at. And I also would like to see the plan. You're going to be sending is it a by right plan that you'll be providing for review? You had mentioned an approved plan, so I'd like to see that as well, if you could share that with the whole board. And the street width, I still need to look at as far as the width of that, so I'm not sure if the width is to go, so I'm going to be looking into that also. Those are my initial questions for tonight. Chris?
First, maybe I misunderstood or heard it incorrectly. Can someone speak to the discrepancy of the 150,000 versus 201,000 square feet of open space, and why we're so apart on something that, to me, is pretty important? And if I misheard it or did the math wrong, please tell me so.
I think you heard correctly. Tom didn't have a plan that identified, so he tried to, he did a takeoff, I think, on the area to understand what that was. We should have provided a plan that was, now we have, and we'll provide that to Tom and to the board. So we're comfortable that we're above the 50%, and Tom's got to review that and make sure he's comfortable. That we know we're close to some of the backs of some of the homes. Is right here. And I think it's also deceiving because the plan today doesn't show that screen porch and that patio. That's where they live, in the backyard. So the house feels like it's pushed up tight. We might make some adjustments in that, and maybe that's our next step, is to look at adjustments, identify those screen porches and those patios.
Okay, thank you. And I would echo Dave, Mr. Atkins' comments about things like the sidewalk, the street parking. It seems to me that when requesting a 20-foot wide road and no sidewalks, to ask for street parking in addition to that seems really like it's asking a lot of a very small area here. The stormwater management, I think, is going to be a very crucial thing that everyone gets on the same page. And I don't want to overlook the importance of that. Also, the third bedroom issue, and it has been an issue for this board in the past, and I want to reemphasize that issue, or that point, to the applicant, that that is what this board is charged with, because that is our bylaw. So we're not going to overlook it. We're not going to let things slide. But at the same time, we understand you are trying to build a home that people feel comfortable calling home. And I also understand there's no privacy fences on this, on any lot or in the whole development? at all?
Mostly not.
If you want to just speak at the
Yeah,
microphone.
sorry to ask
Thank
you to keep getting up.
We try to do most of the screening with landscape because it's a little more pleasant. There may be some locations that there are fences on the townhomes outside their private courtyard, so that some of the courtyard is under roof and some of it extends out. There'd be a private courtyard on these townhomes. And it could potentially be, if there was a deck in this location and it didn't have a screen porch, which does some screening, there may be a privacy screen on the deck itself. Try to minimize those because it closes the porch in. And sometimes we try to address that with tall deciduous trees to give privacy from house to house.
But those would be placed, attached to the deck itself, not in the ground?
Correct, correct. Yeah, and we really look at each situation as a individual, what's best to protect the homeowner. So sometimes it's a field decision based on what's the best way to do it that minimizes the impact from wood and fencing or landscape.
Okay. And while you're up there next to this image, this is not an image you're using any longer, correct? That's okay.
That's the.
And just, it's fine, you didn't have to, but to my eye also, it looks to me like the cul-de-sac radius looks really tight for an emergency vehicle to make that, especially a ladder truck. I just reiterating,
Yep.
it's going to need fire sign off on that.
Oh, yeah, one clarification I didn't share earlier. We did meet with the fire department. They're sending me their large truck template so that Scott can overlay that. And it is currently 100 feet from outside to outside, so it's pretty consistent. That's usually a good size, but we'll take that template and put it around that.
And with regard to that island in the cul-de-sac, will that be curbed? Or will that go right to
No,
grade
We
and grass?
would, much like we've done in Weston, if you get a chance to see that, it's got a, the berm is just a slightly sloped berm, and then it's usually, we like to mound that up, so it's 3, depending on the size of the island, 3 to 4 to even 5 feet high, so that you're not looking at a flat surface, but you have this undulating, natural-looking mounding and landscape that really adds a whole new dimension to the streetscape as you drive around or as you walk around the community.
Okay. One of the things, as the traffic issue was being brought up, currently there's a business being operated there, right? What's the traffic count now when those people, and I believe it's horseback riding, so when they're trying to leave, how many cars are queuing up? And then what's it like? I mean, what time are they doing that now? And the striping is what it is on High Street. So I'm just curious, that's what we're kind of comparing it to. It's a lot of cars coming out of one driveway at the same time. So I'm just curious, if that's their worst case scenario now, what will that be like for these residents when this is all built and done? Do we have a traffic count now?
I don't believe we do.
You said 78. We also heard 111. So I'm going to say it's somewhere in between, because that's usually where it falls. So I don't know what's being generated now between the people, the 2 homes that live there and the business that's being run. I'm just curious because it's already in place. Something is happening right now with traffic count. I'm curious to know what that is.
I don't think we've considered that.
Okay.
No, Jeff, that's right.
And 2 last things. Well, mailbox has been brought up. Are there any designs other than a Cape Cod style home? Or are they all?
We have turned this house into a 2-story colonial that really is to the front of the house. I don't think we have a picture of it, but it's basically
Okay.
the same first floor plan, and that colonial is only over the living room, dining room. So the face is that colonial. It has a,
I'm not stating I have a preference for that. I'm just curious because I
We'd
saw
like to
only
mix.
one style.
right, we'd like
house
to
up
mix
there.
that up.
And lastly, the emergency road itself was just touched on, but never really, we didn't delve into that. What is your proposal for the emergency road, for the materials used, and the maintenance of it, keeping cars out of it from using it on a regular basis? How is that, what's your proposal for that?
We'd like to do a grasscrete product there, something that we can drive on and maintain. I know that the fire department has some concerns about that, but I think their bigger concern is not necessarily the surface, but that it's plowed constantly through the season. He mentioned to me that it's usually done as the declarant's on site, it gets plowed. When the homeowners association takes over, it's not. So we could put language in the documents to make sure that that gets plowed. Historically, we've put just a small gate that is not locked, but just decorative to stop people from driving in at this location, and probably something at that end as well. Sometimes it's been a plastic chain so that the truck can actually just drive right through it, and it brakes simply as they drive through it. He mentioned that the planning board or the town likes to have the tip bollards that are installed there, but I'm not sure. That was what the fire chief mentioned to me last week when I met with him. The gate is, I can send you a picture of what we'd like to do, a wooden gate that's actually pretty nice looking. I can send it to Abby and she can distribute it and
Okay.
unlocked.
And what is the distance between the emergency road and the main road? Those two, yes.
Oh, I'm guessing it's 120, 110, something like that, 100 feet. I'm not sure what it is. I can get that information though.
Okay. Because the impetus behind the emergency road is, should one be clogged, the other one would be remained open. But that's as close as we've had in recent years anyway for an emergency road and the main road to be together. Usually it's found at the other end of the project. And I understand why it's where it is. I just saw that and that was my knee-jerk reaction. That's why I asked what the distance was. If it was 50 or 70 feet and you had a big 80-foot tree close by, it could, in theory, block both. So that's why I asked for that dimension. Thank you. And that's it for me.
All right, Bill?
Yeah, there's a lot here, and there's a lot of work to be done by you and us over the next probably few weeks. But I do have a couple of things. I've been in many 55 and older communities, and sidewalks, the ones that we've enjoyed the most are the ones that have sidewalks. You can go out, walk in the morning, walk in the evening, what have you. So I think sidewalks would be a nice thing to have. And I don't know if you've given any thought. I think Brian might have mentioned alternative energy. I kind of like to see new projects lean that way, but if you have a ability to do that, you can probably let us know. And I'll leave the rest for next time. Thanks.
Okay. All right, so the board have asked their questions and comments, so I'd like to open it up to the public. So if anybody would like to speak, you can cue yourselves at the microphone and ask your questions. Sure.
Just sort of clarification, I apologize, I got here a little late because of work, but.
Could you identify yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Robert Sewell, 233 High Street. So I'm
Thank you.
not technically in a butter, but I'm about as close as you can get to being in a butter without it being a butter. No structures between me and the project. Straight view from my yard, from my house, et cetera. Is this project already approved? Because I'm sort of confused. We went to the last meeting we had a public notice of about a year ago, other part of town. It wasn't approved. It was sort of, they gave them the green light to proceed forward with thinking about it and design some plans. This was only the second notice we've ever even heard of, and it was for public comments. And what I'm hearing so far today, and some great speakers, unlike most of them, I'm not being paid to be here, nor am I going to make a lot of money from this project. But I'm just curious, am I wasting my time being here? Because I got surgery tomorrow morning, and I want to make sure I get home and get a little bit of rest. But
You're not wasting your time,
Okay.
but Abby, why don't you explain what the preliminary?
Sure. In 2018, well, this is a special permit application, and the way the zoning is for this section of the zoning bylaw for the OSRD, the open space residential development. Special permit for age-restricted homes has a two-step process. The first step is for the applicant to submit a preliminary review, and that was a concept plan that was approved by the planning board in March 2018. And the primary purpose of that review was for the planning board to look at the suitability of the land and set the maximum density. So the planning board approved that, and that step was required, and that approval is needed for the applicant to submit the final special permit plans. So this is the stage that you're at now. So the earlier review from 2018 doesn't allow any construction, but it allows the application to proceed to this stage. And this special permit application tonight, you're opening the public hearing. It does require the planning board to approve this. 4 of the 5 members need to approve this as a special permit application. So whenever the board feels it has all the information it needs, it will vote on this application, and once that's determined, if approved, that allows the applicant to proceed to construction.
Okay, a couple of things then. My opposing the project from the get-go was always, it's a lot of houses going into a small area. And I understand the over 55 housing statute and the bylaw was passed to encourage houses to waive some of the zoning requirements so you could fit over 55 houses so that people can stay in the town. This just isn't the greatest place for it, and that was always my feeling. That's always been a lot of folks' feeling in the immediate area. As I hear the proposal tonight, some great things, but one thing that keeps coming back to me right now is the words waiver. Everything I hear is, oh, they don't really comply there, but they're looking for a waiver. Well, they don't really comply there, but they're looking for a waiver. They don't have enough open space. They might not have perk tests done. They may not have access. They've got an emergency road that, I'm looking at that emergency road. I don't know how you people feel about fire trucks, but having had one in my driveway down the street just about 2 weeks ago when our smoke alarms were going off, they don't really make L-turn sharp. And I'm looking at that emergency back entrance. It looks like it's sort of an L-turn going in there. I also question the topography of where that driveway for the emergency entrance is. It's a pretty high grade. And when you've got a 30-foot base truck trying to make a steep incline, that causes some problems as well. The frontage of the houses, well, we can get a waiver for that. The road width, well, we can get a waiver for that. Oh, the sidewalks, well, we don't really need them because the 55 people, well, they'll just walk on the road down to the sidewalks on High Street. And then I hear the traffic study, which I understand gentlemen's business is to do traffic studies for developers, but I live there, and I can tell you right now, from 6 to 10 every morning, it's a horror show. Since they restriped the road, which nobody had any input, it was done in the dead of night, on a Saturday night at midnight. They came without any warning and restriped the roads. When we came out Sunday, suddenly we were a 3-lane wide road, heavy traffic going on these roads. And the best part, of course, is the race that they start at the Summer Street light, trying to see with the 2 lanes who's going to get up to the Fox Hill light the quickest. From 6 o'clock on, all we're hearing now is Tresca trucks fighting with people and the horns honking every weekday morning. Sundays, Saturdays, the traffic coming in and out of this town, it's obviously a big problem. We have a real problem trying to get out of our driveway. We come out a little bit, there's no width anymore. We used to have about a 6-foot give where there was a bike lane, you could at least stretch your nose of your car out to look up and down the road. There's no road there anymore. It's the exact width of a car. And when people are coming at 40 miles an hour, and that's a conservative, I think he said the average speed was 38 to 40. Well, if you figure the average speed includes 4 hours of rush hour in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon, where people are often sitting there in traffic, I can assure you most hours it's well over 40 miles an hour. It's just not safe. You put more houses on that area, it doesn't make a lot of sense. The traffic, again, it's just going to get worse. The vision, I agree with the gentleman here who said the vision is tough, or the town gentleman here from the town consultant. It is brutal trying to get out now with the line of sight. 300, when the traffic consultant said, oh, you got a 400-foot vision, you can see that. I've never in my 12 years had 300 or 400 feet of open space at any time of the day. The idea of how many cars are going in and out of there, we're empty nesters. Does my wife, does she leave the house? Yes, she leaves the house. She leaves it, she comes back. She leaves it, she comes back. She leaves it, she comes back. I do the same thing. I can't imagine that the average house is only going to have five entries or exits. That's what I believe 100 and some odd, 111 traffic things go to. The water pressure, the water condition in the ground, I don't know, I'm not a topographical person, but the back of my yard has a giant hunk of granite. And I can't imagine, since my yard dries out, it's got about a foot of soil that they put in when they built the house over the granite. It's not particularly permeable. And when it rains, it doesn't go anywhere. In the summer, it gets very hot. But more importantly to us, when they start blasting and digging to try and put foundations in there, I have no doubt it's going to crack my house. The line of granite is going to continue on. I assume it doesn't just end at the property lines. The vision, I was a little confused. Are they putting, did you say cement boundaries and then berms over them? I wasn't sure what you're saying along the bottom line here. Just, again, when the leaves are down, we're staring right now at the house that's over there. And I just can't imagine what the vision is going to be after that. You seem like you're trying to jam in an awful lot of houses of high value. People who want high-value houses obviously want certain amenities, and I don't have a problem with that, but it's just very tight in there. And I think this project it's not the right place. I mean, you have single-family zoning there. You're trying to squeeze this stuff in. You've got some wetlands in the back. The idea of trails, it's beautiful. It's a great idea, but I think everybody's right. You can't have people walking around. It's so narrow there already. Between the abutters who aren't going to want to see people walking across our yards or watching our houses all the time, and the people that are going to live there, I just don't see it happening. Again, I just think it's too congested. I don't think this is the best project for it. I think the town should, this board should look at the requirements and just not routinely stamp waiver, waiver, waiver. I saw the pictures, the beautiful houses. I'm sure the project in Weston looks great. 69 homes in a much larger attractive area. It makes sense in Weston perhaps, but on this lot, I just don't see it making sense for these 19 homes. So,
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Bill Langenberg. I'm a resident of 259 Dover Road. I've been living in Westwood for 5 years, and one of the reasons that my wife and I moved here, in addition to having great schools and amenities and such, is we really liked the aesthetic of the town. I don't know statistically what the average lot size is, but I'd estimate it somewhere to be between half an acre to an acre of land. This is 8 acres of land and 19 residences. By the developer's estimates, there's about a little less than a quarter acre of land per house. And to echo my neighbor's comments, all of these waivers go towards there's not enough space. That's it. I mean, the road's not wide enough. There are no sidewalks. Debatable about open space. Maybe that gets addressed. But, I mean, you look at the map and the houses are pushed to the very limits while maintaining a little bit of wetlands, which honestly they're going to need for drainage. So my in-laws live at a active over 55 community in Pennsylvania. It's large, and they use the sidewalks all the time. The people are very active. A lot of them have dogs, and the sidewalks are really a requirement. They also have major drainage issues. So sure, maybe it has to do with the developer or whatever, but I think Mr. Houston's comments and my neighbor's comments are well-founded in that that's something you guys should be very cognizant of, especially without sticking my foot in political issues. Rain, is that going to become, heavier, more microbursts, et cetera? I don't know how you guys feel about that. I don't know if it's included in the models, but we don't have gentle Irish rains anymore. It's usually rains hard or it doesn't rain at all. So having a place for all that water to go will be very important. And, it just really seems like too much in too small a space. So I think it's completely unrealistic to expect that the land is not going to be developed. So, I don't object to anything being done, but certainly having something more in keeping with the aesthetic of the town, why people like myself and my wife would move here, would be a lot more suitable to this particular plot. So, I don't know what's there, but I also grew up in Weston. I'm familiar with that area where they put the housing development. It's big. There's a lot of space. So I agree. This does not seem quite like the right place for higher density housing. We have University Station in that area of town, which is more built up. Amenities, walking distance, shopping, all that stuff that you can easily get around. But this just seems like it's going to be really tough, and it seems like I don't see what's in it for the town. I don't see why you guys would be incentivized to approve this project. The tax revenue divided across the residents of the town is minuscule. It's under $20. So why? So that's the majority of my comments. We could get into the traffic study and all that, but you guys have all of that information, so I'll leave it to others.
Great. Thank you very much. Good evening.
I I'm Mary Ellen Washenko, and I live at 226 Dover Road. I've been a Westwood resident for 40 years, and I actually moved to Westwood, like my neighbor and my Dover Road neighbor did, for the open space. I moved for 40 years ago for how pretty this town was, the charm of this town, the open space of this town, the nature of this community. And I'm very concerned, as my neighbor is saying, what does Westwood gain with this development? I'm concerned about that. I'd like to address the developers themselves and say, you know, I'm well over 55. I am more active today in my 5 years of retirement than I was in my previous years. I am on boards in the town. By the way, I'm on the Westwood Historic Society Board. I've been on the Historic Commission for some time. I've been on the Hale Reservation Board. When we come to Westwood, I live right across the road from Hale. Hale is 1,400 acres of gorgeous open space land that Hale has officially maintained for open use for our community. And that's the style that I'm still looking at Westwood for, 40 years later. Over 55, to even address the idea that if we put two people into a house, well, we've got 28 cars at least. And then if anybody's coming and going, we've got 28 cars with 19 houses coming into an 8-acre parcel. My parcel on Dover Road is almost 2 acres. And the way the Dover Road Charlie Howard houses are set up is that we have all open space on my side of the road, which is opposite Hale. And if I look across, and I can actually probably count all of us and see that we probably have 8 acres between my close-knit group of neighbors. If I tried to think 19 houses and trucks and fire department or anything, delivery service, whatever has to be used on a daily basis or whatever basis, it's impossible. It's impossible. You know, the concept, the idea looks kind of attractive because you have a couple of attractive homes on here. But Westwood has already heard other proposals from other developers for this property. And so now you folks have scaled it down to 19 from what the former developer wanted to do. We've done all the studies. We took up the time of our planning board and our zoning board and people like me from the community who become actively involved with the neighbors who are concerned. So you're coming up with a plan with the present owner to try to get the best bottom line dollar that you can from this property. But in the end, I'd like our town to look at what does our town want? Are we of concern? Now let's get to the traffic. That stretch of road, like my neighbor is saying here, who's on High Street, that stretch of road is impossible now. And I'm very familiar with Harlequin Stables and the use of Harlequin Stables and the people who use it and coming in and out. If you can take a look and count the cars that are using it, but it's nothing that I'm worried about or concerned about. This I'm concerned about. This just doesn't, I think it's a danger zone to pass a property like this and put the cars entering and exiting from this property onto 109. Now, I think then you put me and my family in danger and everybody else from Westwood and all the other towns who they can only get to 128 by using 109. I certainly, number one, don't want to see a traffic light at your property proposal. When we put the traffic lights in Westwood a few years ago, probably about 10 years ago. When we started to put more traffic lights in, Dover Road became a cut-through for everybody. So my neighbors that have been committed to our community for the last 45 years and plus have to bear the brunt of all the traffic up onto 109. And I have to make the sacrifice that my pretty designated scenic road in Westwood is now a traffic jam coming, and fast cars coming morning and evening. We all have to make the turn onto 109. I think what you're asking, just the entrance and exit alone is really impossible. I think that it can't make it with 19 houses. And I do have one question for the board. If Harlequin Stables were being sold under the zoning criteria that we have now, they have one home and a stable, and you're saying they have 2 homes. How many homes, according to present zoning, without looking into having open space zoning or however developer proposals, put their plan forward? What now is allowed on that property?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there was a plan put together, and they're going to be updating that and providing that.
Well, that should be a current number.
SRE?
Right.
Is that what it is?
Yes. So a standard subdivision, the lot size minimum is 80,000 square feet. Yeah, a little under 2 acres, so about 3.
So you get
About
4 houses,
So you get-
single-family homes.
Okay, so why don't we all,
No, I know, we're just talking about acreage.
how the acreage, so it's
Th-
2
those
acres, let's
compounded
say it's 2
math.
acre zoning. So we have 8 acres. So fine, every house gets 2 acres and we put 4 houses up there. Go for it, do it. Put your 4 houses up there. I almost feel a little like our new person who's in the news lately, Greta, who's 16 years old from Sweden. And she's saying, hey guys, enough. Look at the overall picture here. What are we really, and that's what I'd like to say. I'd like to be like 16-year-old Greta, who showed up at the UN last week, really putting it to the world and putting it to everybody. Hey, look, this is my future, and this is my future. It's not your future because you don't live in Westwood. The developers don't apparently come from Westwood, but I do come from Westwood, and so do my neighbors. And I'm actually speaking, my neighborhood of Dover Road, we're so close that we're not only called Dover Road neighbors, we're called the Dover Road Gang. And I would say that I speak for every single person on Dover Road. We are close to each other. We're a close-knit group of people. I'm not up here just speaking for 226 Dover Road. I just happen to be here, and I got this information this week. I didn't hear about it in March. I also have another question.
And
If
we,
you-
we're just,
Did I run out of
no,
time?
I'm going to give you the question, but I just wanted just to tighten it up because
Oh, yeah, okay, tighten
we
it
may
up.
have other residents and we
Okay.
want to get going. And there will be, there's more information to come, so there'll be other hearings.
Okay, good.
Likely.
All right. Let me see. Did you hear from the Grove Street residents? We have a High Street resident and a butter. Did you contact every Grove Street resident? You said you had meetings. Did you meet, their backyards face this proposal, and they were against the last proposal of the developer. So what happened?
We had a butter meeting.
Sir, can you go to a microphone? Thanks.
We had 2 meetings at my home, butter meetings. By the way, I do live in Westwood.
You're on?
Yeah, 21 years I've been here.
Which street are you on?
On Long Meadow Drive. So we met with we gave all the abutters the opportunity to come, and a lot of them did, and they expressed concerns, and we tried to address all those concerns in the plan. It was kind of a testament to, I think, the project, the fact that during the preliminary approval process, no one stood up and opposed. There was 1 letter read in opposition. But other than that, no one really opposed the plan that you saw, the pre-approved plan. And this plan is vastly better than that original plan. So, and by the, all 3 developers are going to live at this community and are from Westwood. So we're not the typical developer that wants to build, make money, and leave. This is more of a passion project that we're building for ourselves to live in, and friends and people in the same position as us as empty nesters to join us.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay,
I appreciate that. Good evening.
Hi, Maura Sewell, 233 High Street. I want to talk a little bit about the traffic, because that is something that has consumed me since that Bruins game when they restriped the lines. I've met with Todd to discuss our concerns with that as well. I am the person who cannot turn right out of my driveway. I am the person who cannot turn left out of my driveway. I am the person who cannot turn into my driveway from High Street without having my eyes peeled to the back of my head, because I know surer than I'm standing here, I'm going to get whacked in the back from somebody who is coming screaming up from the center of town, tired of being slow, hitting that. I play pinball with cars trying to get into my driveway each and every day, and I will say the Tresca truck drivers are the best. They stop. Thank God. They stop and they let me in. So my concern is that where the entrance to Harlequin is, anyone coming out, turning right, with the current striping as it is, you have to make a very hard right turn. And I mean hard. I have a small SUV. Anything larger, you're going to go into the oncoming traffic that is headed toward the highway. When I want to go towards the highway and I'm facing that line of traffic that's coming down the hill toward me, I cannot see anything. I can't see the traffic to the right that is headed into Westwood, because the telephone poles, they apparently never checked the sight lines when they restriped the road. I lost my line of sight. And when I go, I do it with it's a wing and a prayer every time you want to go to the highway from that section of High Street right now. You cannot turn left to go to the highway, because all of the cars that are queued up at the light are blocking absolutely every line of sight. It is a real problem. I don't walk on the sidewalk anymore because I can feel the heat of the cars whipping by the back of my legs as I'm walking on the street. My dog can't go down there because he's totally freaked out by the volume of traffic and the speed. I love the traffic, traffic studies are great. Anyone with a computer can come up with something that looks really cool, but it doesn't beat your experience on the ground. I also am concerned about water pressure in the street. When the White Oaks cottages went online with Fox Hill, there was a serious reduction in water pressure in the street. That's something that needs to seriously be looked at. We've had to install a pump to bring the water pressure back to what it needs to be. I look at the density of this project. I'm the smallest acreage in the area at 2 acres. Everyone else is 4, 5, 8, 6 acres of land, and we have 2. But I look at this with 19 homes, and I see 19 dishwashers, 19 washing machines, 38 bathrooms, and I hadn't even considered the cars, 28. At this point, I'm giving up. Cars are what they are out there, but I do think that's something that needs to seriously be addressed before you proceed any further on this. The density is just too much for the neighborhood. It's too much for our water. Fire department is never going to make that. I just saw them try to negotiate my driveway, and sometimes it makes me wonder why our house was allowed to be put there, because the fire truck cannot make it up our driveway. 2 weeks ago, there was an accident right in front of our house in the morning, during the morning rush hour. It took 3 police cars, 1 fire truck, 1 ambulance, and a fire supervisor. That's a lot of town personnel, more than an hour to clear a 3-car accident, which occurred because nobody was paying attention, coming down the hill toward the Summer Street light at a high rate of speed at 8 in the morning. And I agree with everyone else who has said, for a special permit, we're looking at a lot of waivers. As a former lawyer, I know that's what you do. You want to get everything you can out of any particular thing, go for everything you can get. But all this says to me is that this isn't right for where it's being proposed. It also makes me wonder every time I'm sitting in traffic coming down from the highway to that nice "Welcome to Westwood" sign, and I think this is we're developing 109 to look like Route 1. And I think that's a horrible, terrible position for this town to be put in. I mean, you only get one shot at a first impression, and you're taking, if you're adding any more cars to anything to this area of town, you're really destroying any value in what Westwood used to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Ken Goldman. I live in 129 Summer Street. As I was just introduced, I'm the one who wrote the letter last time that was read. I've been here when they developed Stevens Farm. I've been here for several other potential developments on this area. I live in 129 Summer. I'm the fifth house down in Summer Street. You've mentioned traffic. What you haven't mentioned is the queuing on Summer Street that's happening. I've been here 29 years. In the last 2 or 3 years, I've seen queuing from 109 all the way past my house. I'm the fifth house down. I'm also very familiar with Harlequin Stables. You see, I own a stable. I own a stable in Middleborough. So I've been in there many times, as well as for the landscaping that they used to sell there. And during the day, I wasn't there at rush hour, but trying to get out of there is not very easy. I invite all of you, go in there a couple times. Try to get out to 109, see what it's like. It's not very good. I have 4 acres in Summer Street, so I'm going to ask the board, how about if I put 10 houses in my area? What's Westwood going to look like 5 years from now? In my business, I've always asked people to look forward. If you put this in and put 19 houses on 8 acres, what is it going to look like? What's going to happen when the next guy wants to do it? You've heard all the reasons and the traffic. I don't think I need to repeat that. I've seen it. I've seen it for 30 years. It's not getting better. Another thing you haven't considered, they're building 6 or 7 new houses on Summer Street. There's a lot of open land on Summer Street. Mr. Gregory owns, I think, 50 acres, which will be developed within the present regulations. There's no reason to stop it. But what's it going to look like 10 years from now? When I moved in, there was very little on the other side of Summer Street. Where Mr. Sarkis's land was, which is Lee Farm, they broke that up. There's 3 or 4 new houses. On the opposite side, there's 3 or 4 new houses. Summer Street's going to be fully developed, probably within our lifetimes. You're going to add a lot more traffic going from Summer Street to 109. When you're in Harlequin Stables, try to get out and make a left turn. You're going to have 30 more cars some of them trying to make left turns out of there to go to 128 or 95. See how easy it is. We came to a conclusion last time, and I think only Chris was a member of the board last time, if I'm not mistaken. The question was, this is a nice development. Is this the right place for 20 houses? That was the overriding concern, and the board voted, no, it really isn't. You're having pretty much the same thing now. You're having the traffic, you're having the concerns. Fire trucks, when they're going for an emergency, and I've had one in my house, they don't go slow. They want to get there as fast as possible. Making a turn like that, they're not going to make it as carefully as you and I would in our cars. It's going to be a lot different. The present zoning, as I've heard, allows for 3 houses, or maybe 4 houses. You're putting 5 times that on a small piece of property. Is this what you want Westwood to look like? I've been here with many of the other residents over several years, and we all came up with the same thing. What do you want this town to look like 5 years from now? Once you do it, you can't go back. And again, my last question, can I put 5 or 7 or 8 houses on my land? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Brian, if I could just say one thing. You're right, I was on the board, and I just wanted to, for clarity, we never decided anything. It was withdrawn. So we were never asked to make a decision on that particular. It went 2 years back and forth. It was a horrible process.
I believe you needed, was it 4 out of 5 approvals from the board on that permit?
Yeah, it was the same,
Two people were definite.
but it never got to the vote stage. They withdrew.
Good evening.
Hi, my name is Peggy Chury. I live at 165 High Street, which is directly across from the town pound. And like the Souls, I am not a direct abutter, but I'm going to be able to see everything because there's really nothing in the side, my view between us and there. But my biggest issue is the water, which you have addressed, and everybody has addressed, because I could see my house floating away someday, you know? My husband crosses every year, crosses the road and goes down on the other, I don't know the terminology, but the water, whatever, goes down there. And he's the one that walks around, gets the dead trees or branches that might be blocking water flow and stuff like that. And he does that, you know? And so that's my concern. When we have a good storm, I said, my sump pump goes sometimes 48 hours straight, just about, you know? And I can't really say it more eloquent than everybody else about the traffic. I've lived on High Street for 41 years this month. When I moved there, it was a country road. You know, I have seen tremendous changes in the road. And now I feel, although we were told, I don't know if it's definite, but we were told that it wasn't definite about the 3 lanes, and if it's going to stay that way or whatever. But I can't walk my grandchildren along High Street because I don't feel safe enough anyway. And whoever has the record or the traffic pattern, there's a sign up just between me and, you know, 229. It says 30 miles an hour. Nobody does that. And sometimes I don't even know if they're going 40 miles an hour. But a lot of times I have grandchildren in my back seat. And I'm looking in the back, hoping that people notice that I have a left-hand blinker on, that I'm going to turn into my driveway and they don't ram me because I'm making a left turn in a passing lane, technically. And that's my issue. It's really the water and the traffic, and there's a lot of things. And I feel, you know, there should only be 4 homes on that property. I understand there's a business there, and everybody wants the maximum amount of money when they sell their property. I do too, you know. But, like I said, I don't want to see my house floating away someday. That's it.
Thank you.
Hi, James Ahigian, 69 Summer Street. I have about 4 acres also. I've lived in Westwood for over 50 years. I've been on Summer Street for almost 30 years. I purchased there because I liked the location. It had a 2-acre minimum zoning. I was confident, you know, that nothing would ever be around me and the zoning wouldn't change. I guess I might be wrong. It sounds like a great project. It's just not the right location like everyone else is saying, I think. Because of the waivers, the traffic, the drainage, and so forth, and your abutting 2-acre zoning. It's just way too many homes for that area. Also, sounds like my lot's going to be flooding if this goes through, because I have sump pumps now, and sounds like it's a major drainage issue for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Seeing no additional public, one more? Sure. Good evening.
I'm Margie. I actually live at 215 High Street, so I can, I just wanted to attest to, like, the fire engines. We've had emergency vehicles there. They haven't had a problem coming into the driveway. It's happened several times. We had a little small fire in our bedroom. The fire department never had an issue. We've had maybe a few accidents with horses, and the fire department and ambulance has come to the riding arena. So I just want to make that they've never had an issue coming in and out of the property as far as the fire department or an ambulance was concerned. And vision-wise, when I come to the end of my driveway, if I look to my right, doesn't matter how much traffic there is, I can see the traffic light on Summer Street. So there is a lot of vision. I understand the complaint about the traffic and the double lanes there, and that's not something that has anything to do with our development or anything. That's something that the town all of a sudden just made 2 lanes. We woke up and it was 2 lanes. I've actually gotten used to it. I kind of like it. Like, you get out a lot quicker out of our driveway that way. The right-hand turn is a little tough. I have a truck, so it's kind of hard. But if I stay to the left of my driveway and I make a right, I'm pretty good. And I'm sure that the cuttings are going to be completely different with the development. And I guess that I don't think the zoning laws, as far as the OC, the developments have really changed all that much. They were actually lowered somewhat to keep a big development to come in, like 100 units or whatever, or the 40B things. And they have acquired a section of land to meet that zoning for this particular project. So I don't think, as far as zoning laws being changed, I don't think that's I don't think that's been changed to eliminate this project at all. Of course, if there were only 4 acres there, then this wouldn't even be in consideration, because you wouldn't have a right to the over 55 zoning community. And, I mean, that's what the bylaws are here for. So, thanks.
Right. Thank you very much.
Brian, if I could just say something, I think there's a lot of, it's been brought up a lot, the issue of the waivers. I'm not going to say anything about these specific waivers, but waivers are never a way to get a project done. It's a way to get a project done better. So the applicant, one of their first responsibilities is to prove they can build this without any waivers. And Abby, correct me, but have I seen that? Has it been shown to the town that it could be built without waivers?
I think you saw a proof plan during your 2018
And that's going to be an
review.
updated one,
So,
it
yep.
sounds.
So you've requested one for your next plan revision.
So that's what waivers do. They try to make the project better, and then it's up to the board to decide, is the outcome better as a result of these waivers? And there are some waivers that generally speaking, the board is just not willing to waive. And it's usually around safety. So I just want people to understand, the board can never use waivers to get a project done. It's just to get it done better. Better for everyone, better safety, better whatever. When we look at each case individually, every application is looked at on its own merit. So I just wanted to bring that up about the issue of the waivers. And again, I'm not speaking about any of the specific waivers this applicant was asking, just the waivers in general. Just hope that clears something up in some minds.
I think we should move forward with the hearing. So at this point, would the applicant like to respond to any of the questions or give any final remarks at this point? Okay. And then board members, is there any further discussion? It sounds like we're waiting for some additional information. Okay. Seeing none of that, so I think for tonight, I think we're at the 9:20 hour, so do we want to make a motion to continue?
Make a motion to continue the public hearing to Tuesday, November 5th at 7 PM at 50 Carby Street.
So I hear a motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
A motion is second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? So the hearing is continued. Do we have a date on okay, it's in the motion, thank you. All right, so next on the agenda is 45 Clapboard Tree Street. Yeah. Yeah, so
Tuesday the 5th.
Just for the public, it's Tuesday,
November 5th.
November 5th. Okay. Okay, great. Next on the agenda is 45 Clappertree Street, the A&R plan, lot line revision to Lot 3 of the previously endorsed A&R plan that creates 8 lots consistent with the April 23rd, 2019 open space residential development special permit approval for a lot with 40 residences. And is the applicant here to present? Right. If you want to. And do you want a microphone to? Okay, you have it there.
If you recall, in June, you signed an A&R plan that this creates the 8 lots consistent with your special permit approval at the former lodge property. That has been recorded at the Registry of Deeds, but after a recent meeting with Public Works and Sewer Department, there is a lot line revision to Lot 3. This is the old lot line, and then it's been kind of reconfigured. It still meets the same overall size requirement, but they've no longer needed access to the well. They're going to access from the water main.
I'm warning myself. So is this the
Oh, sorry.
soccer
This
field
is
here?
the field lot. So this is
the field
Collaboratory
actually
Street.
gains area. The big concern with the field is
It gains
not
this
being
corner here,
regulation.
yes. So this old corner is being combined with the field lot. And then this Lot 3 that was the single-family house lot that's on Winter Street is kind of reformatted, straightened out. Same overall lot sizes, but they no longer need that little jag because of discontinuing.
I'm Dan Green, president of the Green Company. And what happened was there was for irrigating the soccer field and keeping it green, there was a well system there. It didn't work particularly well, pun intended. I know it's late. In talking with Public Works, we've agreed to provide them water from our system that we're installing with the new OSRD that we had approved. And so now they don't need access to that. There's some underground chambers, there's controllers, electricity, and a well. And we had made a notch in the Lot 3 previously to accommodate that so it would stay in the soccer field lot. The square footage of the soccer field lot is unchanged. The square footage of Lot 3 is unchanged. We've just reconfigured it to square out the lot to make it more pleasing, as well as to make it a much simpler line for the public to know where this lot begins, because most likely the homeowner will put some form of fencing or landscaping close to their lot line.
Can I ask you, why are we resulting in this pie shape here for Lot 7? It seems confusing potentially, especially if fences are to be put up at some point. Or
It was always there in that form from the original part. It's really, what we did was to configure it around the soccer field. And so there's, I think it's 20 feet behind the net that goes with the town-owned parcel, and then we'd be putting up some fencing on ours. So it creates a weird shape.
Abby, was this required for square footage reasons, this little?
Probably.
Was it necessary?
Yeah, probably. It's
To
part
get
of the
over a
open
threshold of some?
the open space area.
Well, all of it's open space. The lot line initially was imaginary because that's all open space. And then the town asked that the lot be deeded to them for the soccer field. So we've included the soccer field and given extra land with all the frontage going up to Winter and Collaboratory Streets.
And which way does the soccer field go? So we're looking at the horizontal line. Does it follow where it shows the acreage?
Yeah. The rectangle shape.
It's a mushroom shape. It's going to be right here because remember we're creating a 40 space.
So it won't have any effect, it doesn't appear to have any effect on the field.
No, the only reason that this was being saved was this is the wellhead, and this is an underground chamber, and this is there are 2 underground chambers. So there's one here and there's one here. Those are not necessary once we convert over to town water. And
It makes Lot 3 a better lot.
it makes Lot 3 a better lot. It also makes it easier for the town to go to town water because now they're not trying to maintain that. The system was kind of cobbled together and wasn't working. The well wasn't producing enough water. They would try to pump at off-hour times, store it in these chambers that were not really watertight, and then pump it onto the field. Now they'll have a more traditional system that will just pump the water when it's needed. So we did that working with the head of DPW, with Todd Korchin.
When did this come up in the process?
About 2 weeks ago.
And was it over a conversation with Todd?
Oh, we've had multiple meetings, and we've been in front of the sewer commission as well. And as part of that, we've come up with ways that we're actually providing the water tap, we're providing the water line to the irrigation box to do that at no cost to the town. So they'll still be paying for the service. But yes.
Dave, do you have any questions?
Nope.
Deb? Chris, do you have anything additional?
No.
Bill? So what is the, so is it,
A&R.
so we're just in,
Or endorse, right?
Endorse
We
the
say-
A&R.
I move that we endorse the A&R, the approval not required plan, because we have found that it, is an approval not required plan.
It has the minimum frontage requirements.
I
we
second
have a
it.
second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions? So that passes. 5-0.
We need to sign this, Abby? Just this one copy?
Thank you.
Or is there more?
This one, the Mylar copy you signed with the
Special Sharpies.
Eight?
The whole thing? I don't know.
That's 40,000 square feet there. 40,000, yeah.
That's not all the lots.
Pays the first.
122 is. Six, I think.
Lots happening. My neighbor's like, what's going on over there? I knew you would know. Because I live down the street from the lodge. I was like, what's going on?
And you couldn't tell them?
It was, do you know Todd, D'Angelo? He used to work for the town. Yeah. He asked me.
Thank you. Debbie, is there anything that we need to close, or is it just? Okay, so next on the agenda is other business. So the first item for other business is review of zoning board of appeals applications. So we have three items. The first one is 10 Longwood Drive. So this is related to our previous.
Yes, this one, the applicant did request a continuance to the zoning board's November meeting. So on October 16th, I expect the zoning board, they'll have to vote and make that continuance. That was after our staff review. The proposal is incomplete because it says the proposal is they're looking at a group home option at a parcel that they own on High Street, but it says they're still in negotiations. So the application is incomplete at this time. We recommended that they need to submit a more complete application. So I did this afternoon prepare a draft memo with comments to them. I don't know if you saw it. It's kind of the last item under other business. Or actually, and I printed it out at your seat tonight. So four affordable residential units are required with their application for the 24 assisted living units. So the zoning requires the affordable residences to be on site, so either part of the assisted living development or off-site. With the planning board would have to make a recommendation to the zoning board, and after review by the housing partnership and Westwood Housing Authority. So if they're going to do off-site, I think you'll need to review that more, and you need a more concrete proposal. Also, a group home, if it's more than 4 unrelated individuals, that does also require a public hearing and review by you. Typically, it's a limited site plan review, a limited EIDR. So in my comments, I'd recommend they would have to submit that application to you and have to be scheduled for a full public hearing.
So what was the original?
Their proposal said that we got last week was for that they're just negotiating and talking to some group home, looking to do 2 4-bedroom group homes on High Street at a property they own, or that they're talking with.
Did you say 2?
2 4-bedroom group homes. So other options for off-site could be, or a combination of on and off-site. They could also do a single-family home, convert it, 4 single families, convert to.
What did they agree to do?
They haven't yet. So they submitted this application to the zoning board, and when they came to you in the summertime at your August and September meetings, they said they were working on it, but they didn't present the affordable proposal yet. If you have any initial thoughts, we could submit it now to the zoning board, but
I would like to review this with fresh eyes.
Abby, if they do 4, do they still need a limited EIDR if they do a group home? If it's
yes, if it's 4 or more unrelated individuals, they need a public hearing with you. So it could either be the limited EIDR, or they could do a formal amendment to their EIDR that was before you and incorporate that proposal. So I expect this hearing to be continued from October to November without discussion, but if you want to send something now for the October 16th meeting, you don't have a meeting before that time. But ultimately, I'd recommend that they need to submit a revised proposal to you and the zoning board to allow you time to review. And before you make a recommendation, you'll need to hear from the Housing Authority and Housing Partnership. So there needs to be some time to do that. So at least you have October 22nd, November 5th, and November 19th is the day before their November 20th zoning board meeting, if that's what it's continued to.
Do we need to take any action? It sounds like, yes, I would.
You can if you wanted. If you want to send something now, I mean, you don't have much to review now. So it's just preliminary comments on what they've submitted, which is essentially saying that this is what they're considering, but they haven't formally proposed it yet. They didn't provide any site plans or drawings or details.
They haven't even given us enough to give them guidance on. I mean, it's not our job to complete their application for them.
Right, so essentially that's what my memo says, is they need a more complete,
Can we recognize Pat Ahern?
I agree with Abby on this. I think you need to send them notice what you expect of them, just to protect your own interest in this process. It looks to me like they're not giving you much to work with, and you need to put them on notice that they need to give you enough stuff to work with so you can make a fair determination.
And it's not a commitment,
No, it's not a commitment. If it's worded properly, I haven't read her memo, but I'm sure it's not worded in a way that you're making a commitment other than to exercise your power of review.
Yeah, it says the planning board recommends submitting a complete proposal to the zoning board, which will be provided to the planning board.
There you go.
All right.
So does does the zoning board deal with this? And then we get copied on it, and then we review it and provide any recommendations to, or comments to the ZBA?
Yes, should be submitted to both. I mean, it depends which route they go, but when they submit their material to the zoning board, I automatically get a copy as well. And then we would schedule it with the
And is there a
planning board.
possibility to increase that 4 units? Like, could they come back and, like we're stating 4, which is the,
4 affordable is the minimum that they're required to provide.
because it'd be nice if they had an option that was higher, similar to what we just signed here, Clapper Tree. Okay.
And Abby, this is, so in this particular application, the zoning board of appeals has the, gets to vote on it basically, right? Because it's in the bylaw, and this section is an old section of the bylaw, it doesn't go through the planning board, is that the?
Right, the
special permit.
residential retirement community is, the zoning board is a special permit granting authority, but then when it talks about the affordability requirement, that gives the authority to the planning board to advise the zoning board.
Dave, do you have further comments?
No, I think we should send the memo.
You're okay with the memo? Debbie, you okay with the memo?
Yeah, just,
Bill? Yeah, I'm okay as well. Next, Abby, is the 21 Pheasant Hill Street. It's to construct a second-story addition that raises the height and the setbacks. So, does anybody have any comments to ZBA?
No.
And the third one is 34 Lakeshore Drive, application to construct a portico and the front setback to construct a second-story addition to single-family house, raises the height and setbacks. Any comments, board members? Seeing none. So that takes care of these ZBA. So the comprehensive plan update, so they had a meeting last week, and they're going through their rough drafts, and then we have a list of the meetings that they'll have for these different subgroups.
Yes.
I got an email about one on Friday.
Okay, yes.
Open space and recreation, I believe.
Right. So the full committee met as a group last week on Wednesday, the 25th. It was their first full committee meeting since the vision session in May. They did all present their initial kind of rough working drafts of where they are. They provided comments to each other on different sections. So they're working on making those updates and preparing to come to you at a series of meetings. And this is the schedule that worked, that they've all verified. So we can review that. But I also want to check on with you that we haven't done your calendar yet for January. So it would be good if we could set your January dates tonight so we can schedule. We were thinking at your next meeting, Tuesday, October 22nd, so we'd like to dedicate the first hour of the meeting for the next several meetings to the comprehensive plan. That way it comes in manageable sections. The idea is that you would get a full draft 1 week in advance that we'd get distributed and posted, and then you'd hear from the committee members, their proposal, their presentation, and you and anyone else that may be present to provide comments and guidance for them to make those changes after that meeting. So they'd like to start with community facilities on Tuesday, October 22nd, open space and recreation, and natural and cultural resources on Tuesday, November 5th. Tuesday, November 19th, transportation and sustainability and resiliency. Tuesday, December 10th, housing and land use. And then Tuesday, January 7th would be my recommended first meeting date of the year, would be town centers and economic development. And they would all take place in this room, except for the January. I know there was already something else in here, so we've reserved the library for the January 7th meeting date.
And what was the meeting that conflicted with a FinCom meeting? Do you have that? I didn't write that down in my calendar.
That was tonight, but we don't have.
Oh, was tonight for real? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
So okay, great. That's easy.
But FinCom, they are, in January, FinCom is meeting on January 14th and January 28th. So for you, for January, I would recommend January 7th and January 21st. If you can.
Abby, are they going to have red line versions of the plans that they're
We're trying to on some drafts, but right now it's, the whole thing is new, so really the whole thing would be red. So I think it would be hard to read, so I'm thinking when they come to you, they'll have their complete draft. And then after that, they would redline after revisions after that, because right now they're using the old plan as a base, but really the whole thing is new, because we have to update all the background
You
info.
have the original Word versions of the other ones, so if you send those along, I can do a quick.
Yep, so we can provide the
If you move
the
paragraphs
2,000.
around, you don't see it, but if it's,
Okay, we could provide like the 2,000 for each section, and then the proposed 2019 version.
that works for me electronically. And, okay, so and then approval of minutes. I didn't have a chance to review the minutes. Is that something that we can move to the next meeting unless?
It was only August 13th minutes provided.
Okay. And then one thing that I wanted to bring up is any agenda items to add to the next meeting or future meetings. So is there anything that board members would like to see at, I have one that I'd like to see I'd like to add, I wrote it down here. The review material format, so we receive it electronically, so I wanted to discuss that as a board, if board members wanted to do that. So this is a continuation of what we talked about earlier in the month about reviewing an iPad, different preferences. So I wanted to add that as an agenda item. So would anybody be in favor of that if we wanted to make a motion, maybe?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, sure.
I think you might be better off taking a meeting with myself, Abby, and Nora before you entertain that as a group. And one other member can join.
Sure.
So you don't have a quorum. So you get a firm understanding of the direction that the planning department has been going in versus what you need. And I see it as two issues. I see it as a workaround for this year and where you want to eventually get in the long run.
Sure.
So I think that might be, given how precious your meeting times are and how late it can go, and I think an offline meeting like that might be more beneficial to you before you discuss it as a group.
Sure. My point is simple, is that the board made a decision at some point, to receive material electronically. And I'm finding that I review better by paper. So a decision was made by a previous board, and that doesn't work for me.
I'm not sure if it was made by a previous board, if it was made by the town itself. And I think a discussion with Nora, Abby, and even perhaps Donna McClellan to understand the history, the direction, and what workarounds you perhaps need. It'll just save you time in a meeting.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, so when can you add things to the agenda? When is the agenda posted?
48 hours, right?
A minimum of 48 hours.
48 hours. So why don't we have the meeting, and then if it doesn't get to where I need to be, then we can add it to discuss as a board.
Yeah, well, I'm here all the time, so anytime you can set up the meeting, it's fine.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. And then is there any other items to add?
I think we started to discuss the budget before, but we never really did discuss the budget. So I'd like to add that to the agenda. And also an organizational chart, because I don't know if all the members know what the organizational chart looks like. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I think even the citizens might be interested in that.
Why don't we put that on the agenda for kind of like the staff meeting that they're talking about? You're talking about your electron?
Oh, sorry.
Talk about electronic issues, you can talk about organizational chart, and you can talk about the budget moving forward.
But the problem with that is with the budget,
If we're going to ask
the
for...
point for a budget to come in, I don't want to miss the timing if we need to ask for a certain item.
I don't think you're going to miss the timing. They're not starting to, it's like the end of November, they're starting to put the budgets together. So we're pretty much in the sweet spot in terms of making requests.
And I don't see the problem with adding it to an agenda. You just,
Up to you. I just think you should add it to the agenda after we have kind of the organizational meeting.
I see your point with the paper, the medium, to finding out is it a technology issue with the town? How do I get things in a printed form? Because right now there's a policy that I don't understand.
Well, it seems to me that the answer could be provided by those people who Mr. Ahern is saying would be in attendance in that meeting.
That's what I'm saying. I agree with that.
Yeah. And I think the other questions could, at least on a surface level, be addressed also.
Correct. And I would encourage another member to join, so you have two set of ears rather than just one.
Sure.
So,
The budget I'm okay with adding just because we need to talk about what our needs are for next year.
That's really what it just comes down to, is our needs.
Yeah, paper is if I miss a week because of the medium, I'm okay. So, is everybody else okay with adding budget?
Sure.
Okay. And I think that's it for me.
So there is a, Bill, there's an org chart, this is on the town website, there's this org chart that shows the...
The organizational chart.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, is everybody familiar with it?
I've seen it.
So that's why I just thought, we're on it, you might as well see where you stand.
I mean, it kind of plays into budget.
Yeah, it does a little bit, yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So budget and organization seems fine to me. Do we need to vote on that? Or is it just going to get added to the agenda?
I don't think you need to take a vote. What's the normal practice for you to add things to the agenda?
Sometimes you can just send an email and it gets added. That's fine.
Okay. And the Board of Selectmen, I know that stuff would be proposed, and the chairman would manage the agenda, and would, if they didn't think they could fit in this particular week, because we wouldn't be out till midnight or something like that, then we'd push it to the next meeting. But they meet every 2 weeks, and so that's the history. So I don't think you need to take a vote to put something on the agenda.
They talk about items at the meeting and then the chair deals with that, or does it come through?
It depends. It can go both ways. So at the end, there's usually, at a selectmen's meeting, there's things that may properly come before the board and stuff like, we need to talk about X, Y, Z. Okay, we'll put it on the next agenda, or we're going to get a report, we'll put it on the agenda 6 weeks from now. So there's some thought process on where to place things.
Right, so I would recommend probably meeting before your next meeting.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll try to meet so it's at least 48 hours before that, so if something needs to be addressed.
We should probably meet, a lot sooner. And I know, because on October 22nd, your next meeting, you will have a few other items. That's when we will start the comprehensive plan, and then you have at least 2 other public hearing items on.
Okay.
So we should probably meet within the next 1 week, the next week or so.
And then how do we schedule the site visit for those who couldn't make it yesterday? Same thing, email? We didn't talk about that while the applicant was here.
So the members that couldn't make it, do you have a time that you could let me agree on now, and I could coordinate with the,
Yeah, I'll send you an email.
if you want to go on one, you can, if you just let me know a few times maybe, so that I can communicate with the applicant and get the property owner's permission.
Abby, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
My experience with these kind of things is everybody wants to go give them 3 times of about a 3-hour slot when you can make it, and she'll magically make it happen.
So we've come to the end of the agenda. Would anybody like to make a motion to?
I move we adjourn.
We have a motion. Second?
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Meeting is closed.